Hey everybody, this is Joseph Oakley of Stokely Films. I'm the co-writer, the director, and the creator of the new slasher sensation, which will be out on DVD and digital in the next month or so. And this is my very lovely, my very vivaciously talented, my very bodaciously, delightfully, titularly presentable co-host.
Hi everybody, I'm Mariana Chipaleta, and welcome to our podcast, No Country for Joe and Mariana.
Yes, wonderful. You can't do much better than that, as I always say. And today we have a really wonderful topic in episode for you, I do believe. We have a little bit of news that we're going to cover, and then we got this movie that we talked about a little bit before, but then we ended up watching recently, and we want to do a little bit of a review about that. Mariana.
Yes, Joe.
Have you been reviewing or watching anything in the news recently that you want to talk about? What's going on with you, my dear?
So instead of watching something this week, I got into playing something this week, and I was very excited for this game, The Last of Us Part 2. Unfortunately, I was very disappointed, and I've noticed that kind of echoes through a lot of the gaming community. The game delivers in a lot of technical ways, but story-wise, and I'm always looking at things from a story point of view. I'm a writer. I like to look at it from that point of view. Story-wise, I was not a fan. That's my biggest critique of that game. And it's so heavily based on the story, because you're just going through this revenge story. So I felt like that there was something missing there.
What is the first? So you're talking about the sequel to a game. What is the first?
The first one is called The Last of Us.
And what is that about again?
And so it's this basically zombie. There's infected that you have to that they're trying to eliminate. I guess it's a post-apocalyptic world. It's not open world. It's a very linear storyline, but at the end of that one, so sorry for any spoilers, but at the end of that one, Ellie is just this little girl that they're going to basically be able to create a cure using her immunity. And there's this guy Joel, who's like a father figure to her, who saves her because it was going to kill her, but it was going to be for the good of humanity, right? Mm-hmm. But they decided to just run away instead anyway. In the second one, it's kind of the continuation of the story. It's 4 years later, and the really cool thing about the game is that they did an amazing job with the graphics, and so you really feel like you're in this, not just as the apocalypse has happened, but you feel like civilization has actually started to evolve again from that. And the graphics are amazing, the movements are amazing. My biggest critique, other than the story, and it's not so much a critique, it's more of my own personal style of game. I'm not a fan of stealth missions. This feels a lot like you have to be stealthy a lot more than actual combat. The combat is pretty good. The jump button is useless. There's no getting around that. If there was no jump button, you would get through the game exactly the same way.
So is it more about you dislike the mechanics of the game over the story itself thus far?
I dislike the story. Not they did a great job with the graphics and everything.
What is it about the story that you're disliking as compared to part one?
So without giving too much away, the story just has a lot of plot holes. And there was this huge kind of push that the main character Ellie is a lesbian, and then the main antagonist is a transgender person. And so what I was expecting was more story regarding those things, but it was done in such an awkward way for both the protagonist and the antagonist that it never really captured that lifestyle.
Okay,
they're kind of forcing the knowledge of them being of their sexuality, but not really playing with it. And I feel like there was just so much potential with that story, with both of those storylines.
That's intriguing. So you think they put like politics over story structure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just felt like a little bit like that, like it was being pushed too much.
And you were saying that this is kind of like a sentiment running throughout the fandom of the video game itself, then?
Yeah, the story is what is has gotten everyone kind of, you know, a little edgy because it did not deliver. That being said, the game is enjoyable to play. Like if you just want to sit back and play a game and see this beautiful scenery, and I mean, it takes you all the way to post-apocalyptic Seattle, and you have these amazing architectures that it looks exactly like Seattle does today, but with a lot of green in it.
Oh, interesting.
And there's like times when you're on a horse, it kind of reminds you of Red Dead Redemption. But then there's times where it kind of like the gameplay is kind of like Uncharted. So, and you kind of see those similarities in there, which is what makes the game, those are the elements that made the game fun for me.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I still haven't played part one. I know a lot of people recommended it to me, and I plan on playing it at some point. But I always find it quite interesting when people are largely disappointed in a game and they say it's because of story and how politics are put forward. And I know we don't really talk about politics here or anything like that, but you know, when a story does put politics ahead of story, that can sometimes like become a detriment to things as they were. I don't think I really have anything deep to say about it at this time, but I think I did hear that kind of echoing throughout some of the websites and reviews and whatnot that I've heard about Last of Us Part 2. I guess that's unfortunate. Of course, you know, people that know me, I'm more of like a Contra guy from like 1980s. I like to run and gun. I don't think too much about story when it comes to video games personally. I just like to blow shit up. But you know, there is some interesting story elements, like you said, Red Dead Redemption. They had this really cool zombie version, like in a DLC of sorts to Red Dead Redemption. It was so like scary, I think, that I couldn't keep playing it because it was too tense. Like there's certain games that are, excuse me, too suspenseful for me to be able to keep up with them, because like I can't even play like some of the sequels to Mario too much, or like especially Mega Man. Like Mega Man is like oh, the pressure, this is so freaking like stressful to me right now. I can't do it. I gotta watch somebody else freak out about it and then I laugh at them, but I can't personally handle that. So you know, and in the way that you're talking about the game mechanics and stuff, I would probably enjoy watching it, less playing it personally. But that's just me. I do enjoy story that way, but not when I'm playing something. I guess that's what I'm saying. Mariana Chipoletta.
Joseph Vogley, what about you? What have you been watching, doing, hearing in the news?
Okay, so I've been catching up on some things here and there, and I've been kind of like paying attention to some things in the news that I'm very interested and very passionate about. So one, I'm going to tell you about right now. So I've been sitting around, and I'm a horror fan, as everybody knows. You look at my wall, everything like that. And one of the things us horror fans, as older horror fans do, because I'm getting to be a little grayish here and there, is we like to sit around and watch VHSs. Now, a VHS is like this thing. It's about yay big, yay big. I'll show you what one looks like, okay? It looks like this, okay, for you youngins. And we used to put it in this here box, and it goes chunk, chunk. And then you hit this play button, which is an actual play button. And it goes click, click. And then it takes a second or two to start winding, because there's like some tape that you're actually watching things on, as it were. And so I've been sitting around watching some old VHSs today. And one of them is this horror film. And we love to watch old shitty horror films as horror fans. Even we love good films, we love bad films. You just never know what you're going to get. I watched Scarecrow Slayer today.
Ooh.
Yeah, look at that. Isn't it? It's a pretty cool cover, right?
It's crazy weird. I
Yeah.
loved
So
it.
I have to say that as far as the look of the film itself, like the killer actually does look like this. The
Really?
killer, yeah, it does. So sometimes you get like this really cool cover art and then it looks nothing like that. However, that being said, it does look like this in there. It's very cool looking. There's a lot of cool scenes. It has one of my favorite horror icons, Tony Todd, in it, who we all know from Candyman. He's a great, great actor. I've met him once actually at a horror con. He's a giant of a man. Uh, my neck actually hurt when I was looking up at him at this thing, because I was standing to go get a picture taken with him. I was like, oh man, this guy is huge. And so he's always good no matter what. So if it has Tony Todd in the credits of sorts, then I'm going to watch the film. And he's always good. The movie, maybe not. This is one of those maybe nots. So it is about a group of teenagers that are going to try to steal the scarecrow from a farmer's farm. And it turns out that the scarecrow comes to life and it kills people. Somehow this scarecrow ends up taking on the soul of this person that gets killed, and then that person's in there. I mean, the movie's a mess all over the place. Like, I'm usually pretty good about paying attention to the plot, but things are happening all over. I remember at one point they're out in the field and Tony Todd is accidentally shoots this kid and some weird stuff happens where this kid's like soul goes into the scarecrow, and then the next thing I know they're all in the hospital. I'm like, what are they doing in the hospital? And Tony Todd's in the bed, and Tony Todd's still great. I think he makes up his lines a lot of the time because he's generally a smarter person than the writers of these things. Anyway, the movie is all over the place, but the scarecrow looks really cool, and there's some very cool bloody moments in the film. I can't say that I would highly recommend Scarecrow Slayer other than if you love Tony Todd, then go and check it out. I don't even know if you can find this movie anymore. It's an Asylum film who does Mega Shark versus Crocosaurus, things of that nature. This is long before that, mind you. This is back when they were just doing a couple horror films here or there. If you want to see Tony Todd in something, go watch Candyman. Don't watch Scarecrow Slayer unless you're desperate for some Tony Todd. I guess I was just desperate for Tony Todd this morning, and I ended up watching this. So that is the movie I watched this morning and that I reviewed and kind of recommend, as it were. I believe I also watched something else today, and so did Mariana. Chipoletta! I have to sing your last name, Mariana. I truly do. It's such
You're like serenading me. It's wonderful.
I do. Yeah, I mean, it's that the romance language, as it were. My name's Vogely. I know where it's from. It ain't that cute. But as much as Chipoletta. So, Mariana Chipoletta, what are we talking about today?
Well, it's funny that you brought up Scarecrow Slayer as being a confusing movie because the topic of today is The Children of the Corn 666.
Yes.
Which is a confusing movie.
Yes. So we're talking about cornfields. We're talking about there is no scarecrows in Children of the Corn 666. We were talking about Children of the Corn the other day, the first film, and kind of the franchise in general. But I thought it would be a really good idea to go from 1 to part 6. I'm saying this not because 2 through 5 are particularly bad films. They're so-so. They go up and down. Naomi Watts is in part 4. Eva Mendes is in part 5. So you can never really go wrong when you have these two beautiful women in these films. Parts 2 and 3 are generally kind of interesting. There's some pretty cool kills here and there. Part 2 gets a little kind of hippy-dippy as far as its theme goes for me. But I like part 6, and I wanted to bring up part 6 because it is the return of Isaac, who was in part 1. Yeah. That is why we're jumping ahead a little bit here. Isaac, who was played by John Franklin, who is actually a rather incredible actor. He played cousin It in the
Adam's Family.
Adam's Family films. Goes, and that's what he does in that. He's really good in that. But in the first Children of the Corn, I think he delivers a rather brilliant performance.
Absolutely.
He does. He's like the emotion that he gives in that film, especially during the final scene when he gets, spoilers, of course, he gets inhabited by He Who Walks Behind the Rose, and then he fights off Malachi, and all that stuff happens. Well, Children of the Corn 666, it takes place 19 years later. Mariana Chipolette,
Yes, Joseph Oakley.
could you do our viewers a favor? Because you're so lovely, so talented, so enchanting, as it were, my dear.
Okay.
Could you tell them what, just kind of break down in a little short little emphasis, what is Children of the Corn 666 about? They don't want to hear me jibber jabber. They want to hear your lyrical little, you have that sing song little thing going on where you go, because you're from the boot, as we say.
Well, Children of the Corn 666 is, it starts out with this woman who is going back to Gatlin. She's adopted, and she's going back on rumor that that's where her birth mother is. And her name is Hannah. And she's been having these like nightmares and these visions, and so that kind of reminded me a little bit of the clairvoyance of Sarah in the first one, except in this one it seems to actually have a purpose, and that purpose is that she is one of the chosen ones, along with another child that happens to be, spoiler alert, Isaac's child. And so she's going back to find out about herself. In the town, everyone is waiting for this prophecy to happen, where she's supposed to come back, and she is basically Isaac will rise, and he does. He's been in a coma for 19 years. And so he rises, and so they have this harvest festival, basically, where they're going to do a ceremony joining the firstborn son and the firstborn daughters of the original cult members. And the movie kind of succeeds in that, but it does not do itself any favors with some of the editing that was done in the story itself. It got a little confusing. Like, it was particularly like the connection with Gabriel, who is later revealed to be He Who Walks Behind the Rose, and all of the characters were really great in this one. I thought it was really cool that that all of the names are all biblical names. One of my favorite characters is Jake. He's the brother of the police officer, who is she's very much a believer that Isaac is going to return. And then you have Rachel, who turns out is the mother of Hannah, but she's very against this. And the most infuriating thing is that every time that Rachel's like, "You need to get out," Hannah's like, "What? You need to get out." And she just stays there. She just
like,
in the graveyard, in the like murder.
She stands there.
It was cool. But there's also another thing that I noticed, was that there was not so much of the corn stalks in there. Like there you definitely like get her like getting pushed off the road into the corn rows. But not so much of the like shaky cam POV that you got in the first one, right? So in this movie, it's more of those little insidious little spies called children that are just like in there, and they're just being creepy. There's also that creepy child at the motel that scared the crap out of me.
The door, that was the creepiest part of the movie to me. He was just kind of like
smile.
Yeah, like Of course, I was thinking, I was like, yeah, I'd be smiling too because that gal was pretty hot right there.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, I think okay, keep going. I keep.
Oh, I mean, I only have like two, maybe three more things to say about it. One, I really enjoyed when Matt impales himself.
That was sweet, right? So
That
yeah,
was an
like this
awesome kill.
guy Matt. So like the coolest kill in the movie was a dude killing himself, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't even know why it came up. Like the other dude convinced that dude to kill himself. You don't know because
Well, I think it's because he has that power, you know, to like, yeah,
oh
that's what I think. And you know what made it really stand out too was like the soundtrack of these movies is usually pretty like, you know, it's a minor key and it's slow and it's suspenseful, but in that scene they have a song from Faith and the Muse, and it's almost, it's like it's a folk, almost heavy metal,
yeah.
like, and it's just a quick part of it, like only one verse of it, but it was really interesting, and it like really set that scene apart from the rest of the movie. And I feel like that was really like a turning point. It was like a cornerstone of the movie.
That,
Sorry.
I know. I noticed that too, and it was really interesting because you don't. I mean, it was the late '90s, and I remember in the '90s there was a lot of like the late '90s. There was a lot of kind of this hard rock sort of things that got into horror films, like uh, Spawn for one had like a lot of like Korn and other thing music in it, and so did Scream, and so basically Valentine, everything that was coming out at the time, basically had this kind of I don't alternative rock sort of soundtrack, but this was the one moment where they actually had that in the film, and I
Mhm.
thought, okay, that's actually kind of a cool song, and this is a cool kill moment. So it's interesting that you brought that up. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So I think in the film, it's rather disjointed all over the place. There's some really good players: Stacy Keach, Nancy Allen.
Yeah.
Nancy Allen, of course, of RoboCop fame, one of the most beautiful women of all time, one of the best actresses, in my opinion, of all time, is in this film. They're not left with a whole lot to do, but the film, I think, as disjointed as it is, I think it is a worthy successor to Part One, because it still takes a
Absolutely.
lot of those story threads. You get the cult, you got Isaac coming back, John Franklin, who co-wrote the film, FYI, which I think is really interesting. I think I did a little kind of deep dive research, and there's nothing to be seen about behind the scenes on this film, but you know for a fact that this is like you just feel that it probably had like some crazy editing issues going on and maybe some reshoot stuff because the story is all over the place and anybody with a sense of story would be able to do better. The director is Amber Seeley, who is actually I hope I got that right. No, I'm wrong. Is Carrie Scugland. The director is Carrie Scugland, who has done lots of stuff with the Punisher TV series, The Handmaid's Tale, Walking Dead. Like she's done a lot of stuff over the years. You know, this is a person, Carrie Scugland, because I messed up earlier, is actually, you know, a rather accomplished director. So you know, there's just something going on. I would love to talk to some of these people about what happened behind the scenes there. Um, but you can tell there's something that kind of happened behind the scenes that kind of messed up the story elements here and there. But you can tell that there is a really good story somewhere in this film. Some of the kills are very good. Some crazy things happen. Some of the motivations of the characters are a little iffy there and there. But overall, I liked it. I've seen this a couple times, 2, 3 times now. Mariana,
Yes, Joe.
would you recommend this film to people?
I would. I would recommend this film, and because of the number 19 being such a uh, prominent symbol in these films, I would also recommend drinking 19 Crimes. It's a red wine, and it's
Ooh.
wonderful, and it's cheap. So, so
So
perfect.
you heard it from the lovely, very talented Mariana Chipoletta. She recommends the wine brand 19 Crimes to go with Children of the Corn 666. So if If you want, actually, I would probably drink an entire bottle of 19 Crimes and then watch Children of the Corn 666, and then you'll probably enjoy it that much more.
I really enjoyed the ending of that movie, much more than the ending of the first one.
Right? It does have this great ending. It's like you may have to suffer through a lot of the film to get to this really good ending, but and we don't want to give away too much here, but there is a good ending that pays off. I mean, so long as an ending pays off all the way that you have to deal with kind of like, what I would do want to say is like, okay, there's no nudity in this film, so people know me, I love my nudity. However, there's no nudity, but there is some very attractive women in skimpy clothing. Thank you. That works well enough for me, and it has a good payoff. And almost all of the kill scenes are actually really cool. So I would say if I were giving it like a horror movie rating, I would say 4 out of 5. Nah, 3.5 out of 5 machetes. What would you say? Out of 5 machetes, what would you say?
This one, I think I would agree with you with the 3.5. I hate to give it such an average score, but I think the story really could have, it had more potential than it actually gave off.
But you can sit through it. You can go to the ending, and the ending was actually enjoyable. There's cool kills. I would have given it half a machete more had I seen a nipple. I did not. But 3.5 machetes. It's a solid film. It's a worthy successor to part 1. I still recommend going back to 2, 3, 4, and 5 because there's some interesting elements to that. The Children of the Corn series itself, there's been like 9 or 10. There's a new one coming out here soon. They've never been great films. The first one is a very enjoyable film, not a great film. But as a horror fan, visit the Children of the Corn, especially, if you don't feel like digging through all of them, go from part 1 to part 6. You have a good back-to-back, like a bookshelf back-to-back sort of thing right there, I would say. So, all right, everybody. Well, this was really cool. Mariana Chipoletta.
Joseph Oakley.
So we talked about a wine, 19 Crimes to go with this. Could you tell us a really lovely Italian dinner that might go with this as well?
I would say possibly cooking it a pasta sauce, like a red sauce with ground meat, and then serving it right before someone gets murdered in the end and you see guts.
Oh, that's a good call because you want to see the meat and the blood and the grits and stuff. All right. That's good. So make sure that you get some pasta and some red sauce and some 19 Crimes to go with your Children of the Corn 666. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We got some really cool ones coming up. Next week, we got some very lovely guests coming to join us as well. All right, we'll talk to everybody soon. And everybody take care. Mariana Chipoletta, could you please say something lovely in Italian to the folks?
Spero che avete un buon fine settimana.
My God, I am just red hot right now. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you later. It was good.
Bye. Bye.